It's good to see you again, Senator Stool, and good to see that
You
they
too,
let you
Mr.
out of the
Allen.
lockdown.
We haven't seen each other for a while, so welcome back.
Thank you.
Or I'm back, one of us are back anyway, so it's good that you can travel. Come up from Melbourne?
Sydney.
Sydney, sorry, Sydney.
So I think last time, no, a couple of times ago when we met, I was at the NTC, which is in Melbourne.
Yeah, I thought it was in Melbourne, that's right.
Yes.
So, Mr. Allen, thank you very much, and I'll give you the opportunity now to tell us who you are and in what capacity you're appearing today.
Sure, thank you, Senator, and thank you, Senator McDonald. My name's Jeff Allen. I'm the Chief Executive of Austroads. Austroads, and if I can do a brief introductory
No, I want
statement.
you. Yeah, please
Sure.
do. Yep.
Sure. Look, thanks very much for the invitation to appear, and I'm conscious we didn't actually do a submission to the inquiry, so I'll probably cover a few things in my introduction that I would have put in the submission. So, Austroads is the Association of Australian and New Zealand Roads and Transport Agencies, so we're basically a member organisation of transport departments.
Yeah.
We've been in existence since 1934, then in 1933, as a result of Australian transport ministers coming together, they decided to form an organisation of state and territory road agencies. We've had different names over that period, but primarily our mission has been the same. That is to help road and transport agencies improve practice and deliver national consistency over a range of areas. So starting with roads and signs and expanding out over that time. So we do this in a number of ways. Firstly, we conduct strategic research, which helps road agencies address critical and emerging issues. Second, we provide advice to road agencies by developing and maintaining technical guides, standards, tools to promote national consistent approaches to various things. And I know the committee is particularly interested in our guidelines on rest areas. There's been a number of inquiries.
You're reading my mind, yep.
Thank you, yes.
Did I have that look on my face, did I?
Well, I think I've appeared before you about 8 or 9 times,
yes.
So I can know what you're thinking by now, hopefully, yes. We also deliver services to the Australasian road agencies, and 2 key services in particular. One is delivered by Transport Certification, which effectively provides assured telematics data to regulators and to state governments under various schemes. And the key one under the Heavy Vehicle National Law is the Intelligence Access Program. But we also operate the National Exchange of Driver and Vehicle Information System, which is the exchange of driver licence and registration information between jurisdictions and with law enforcement bodies and the regulator. And finally, we work with international associations to encourage best practice from overseas and bring it to Australia. And we've been a member of PARC, which is the World Road Association, since 1964. But our main area is in research and strategic guidance. And we call that our work program or a research and work program, and we operate 5 programs within that. The first one is on road safety, and we've got 3 streams within that. The road safety program itself, road design, and also a registration and licensing sub-program within that. We maintain an infrastructure program, one on network, of which there is a sub-program around freight, and it was under that sub-program that we did the heavy vehicle driver rest area guidelines. We also have a future vehicles program and an environment program. But the key things I'd like to touch on in this brief introduction are the heavy vehicle rest area guidelines and the training and licensing arrangements, given there's been a number of comments about those. So in 2019, Austroads produced the guidelines for the provision of heavy vehicle rest areas. Now that was very much driven by one of your former presenters or witnesses, Rod Hannafy. So Rod was a big driver in that, but we certainly engaged a lot with various trucking organisations around Australia in developing those.
This was 2019.
2019, so only in the last couple of years. Was certainly, as I say, requested by the industry and engaged a lot with the industry in developing those guidelines. When you look at the front of the guidelines, it acknowledges the work of various trucking associations and individuals. So we're very keen on having those and having those adopted by agencies, but realising that it is a matter of governments to where they can find the money in implementing those. But we do provide, there's a decision tree within the guidelines about how and when traffic agencies and road agencies should consider providing rest areas. And the second area I'd like to touch on is the heavy vehicle driver competency framework. So again, I know a number of presenters or people who have given evidence, both written and verbally to the committee, have touched on that, including, again, the Road Freighters Association and the Victorian Transport Association earlier in the week. So The current heavy vehicle driver competency framework was developed by Austroads and it was endorsed by ministers in 2010. And it was designed to set a standard where there would be appropriate progression between the heavy vehicle hierarchy. So people would be trained and would graduate from light rigid to heavy rigid to, through to multi-combinations at various levels. Now, that competency framework was written before the establishment of the heavy vehicle national law, and it was based on the assumption that the regulator would do more things than they currently are allowed to, or than actually transpired once the regulation developed. So a couple of years ago, the infrastructure and transport ministers gave us a reference to review and update those the heavy vehicle driver competency framework, which we are doing at the moment. And again, I would hope by the end of next year, 2022, we'll be able to go back to ministers with recommendations around improving the heavy vehicle driver competency framework, and encourage things like exemplar licensing arrangements in relation to driver training and assessment standards, appropriate licence class progression arrangements, given we appreciate the criticism by a number, including industry, about mandatory time periods rather than competency-based progression through the hierarchy, etc. So again, we hope to complete that by next year to take to ministers at the end of 2022 for endorsement.
Thanks, Mr. Allen.
Sure.
Thank you. And again, may I ask, why does it take so long? I know you're dealing with states and territory, which is always going to be challenging because everyone's got the biggest, hairiest chest, I suppose. You're not allowed to say that.
Yeah.
But we have, it's the industry itself is screaming out for reform. You've heard, and the witnesses that have come here, the training industry is screaming. We've gone to the lowest common denominator. We're seeing trucks running over with no brakes, people getting killed. This is not a one-off. What holds it up?
Look, it's fair to say there are a number of things. As I say, the framework wasn't rolled out as originally designed because of the heavy vehicle national law didn't have the original or the breadth of the intent as it does now. It was intended to be broader than what it ended up being. But look, I'll put my hand up. There's probably more we could have done in terms of keeping it on track. But you outlined this before, dealing with the 6 states, 2 territories, and also the Commonwealth. You do need to get agreement. And as a member organisation, as I say, I've appeared previously as part of the NTC. The NTC, you stand in the shoes of the public and advocate for a policy position. Austroads is about working with our members to get an agreed position and what's an agreed approach. So it does take a little bit of time.
So is there a grand poobah at the end of the day that says, look here, mob, don't care how much you want to argue and who's got the biggest, hairiest chest, we've got to fix this because people are getting killed on the roads? Who's the main boss?
There are two poobahs, or there's groups of poobahs. The first one's our board, which consists of either chief executives of road and transport agencies or DEPSEX mostly, or it's the next level. We do have a relationship with the Transport Ministers' Council. So not with the actual council, with the senior officials group that reports to the council. So we give advice to ministers on what they call technical matters that inform policy. So the heavy vehicle driver competency framework would be one of those matters where we would give advice on. Yeah.
Could I come to you, Mr. Allen, just pretend I'm the Minister for Transport here, right? And I get over Austroads and I say, look, this is ridiculous. This is me. I'm having industry screaming at me that we don't have fit for purpose training. It was all right years ago. It's no good now. They actually want to invest in training, but they want to do it properly. They don't want people getting their MC licence in 8 hours because they've driven a bus somewhere. Could I come to you and say, make it happen?
If you're the transport minister,
I would always say
I think it's about, probably not as a one-off minister, but through resolution at the ministerial council, yes.
So I would have to go to the 6 states and the 2 territory ministers because they're all whiz kids on transport, and they actually say to them, we need to do this, and they'd all go, sure, no worries.
Yes. Yeah,
so it can be done?
It can be done, yes.
Okay.
And as I say, it certainly was the intent in 2010. It just wasn't rolled out that way.
So we just need a senior minister to say, I'm going to put it on the, is this what it is? Put that on the agenda for the next TIC or IMM, whatever it's going to be called next.
Infrastructure.
So they can do that?
They certainly can do that. And I've had discussions with the Commonwealth, including recently as this morning, in relation to progress and the need to ensure this is progress is put to ministers, and again, in advance of evidence to this inquiry, I did earlier in the week, not realising the evidence that Peter Anderson from the VTA had given.
Very passionate.
Yes, to give an update to chief executives about where the project was up to. So I'm conscious we could have done more as well to communicate our progress.
So can we get this on? Is this on the agenda for the next tick?
The agenda's probably not set yet. It's fair to say. Minister, Senator. Yeah.
That's right. No, I was just pretending I was
in that role. That's right. Yes.
If I was, you wouldn't be sitting here with me. I'd be saying, "Good on you. Thanks for doing that, Jeff. You're a champion." Okay. All right. Okay. Now let's come back to. All right. Okay. So it's got to be driven by any minister, Commonwealth or state, that can put this on the agenda.
Yeah, and we get a number of references. So the draft road safety strategy that the Commonwealth's developing, there'll be references on things that we can do in that regard. So we get references from the Transport Ministers' Council frequently. So it's not unusual.
So when they go to a tick, what is it? An all-day thing, or is it a couple of days? Or
tick with COVID, things have been truncated. They've been video conferences and slightly shorter, but normally they're half days. I think they start at about 8 or 8:30 and go through to about lunchtime.
And they meet how often?
Twice a year.
Gee, that's not long for all the stuff, all the issues that you think would be floating around. You don't have to comment. No. You know, I wouldn't put you in that position. Yeah. Okay, let's get back to the National Heavy Vehicle Rest Area Guidelines. Mm-hmm. Is that what we call it?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So tell me all about that, and tell me who sits there and says, this is where we need the heavy vehicle rest areas, and this is the design we need, and this is the way we need them facing, so the lights aren't in our windscreens or the sun's not coming up in our windscreens. And who does it?
So I'll separate.
What makes it all up?
I'll separate out the two things. So the design from the location.
Sure, great.
So in relation to the design, so these guidelines are just that, they are guidelines, realising that there might be geographic limitations on the site, or there may be other things that you can't fully comply with the guidelines. But I understand most, if not all jurisdictions, generally have an intent to deliver on the guidelines. So there is a whole lot of things in here in relation to appropriate safe moving, obviously, eliminating the need for reversing. Obviously, you don't want reversing for multi-combination vehicles, etc. Yep. And placement, separation of light vehicles and heavy vehicles. And I know before Rod Hannafy was talking about toilets and trees, whatever. We do have recommendations in here around shade and bins and facilities and whatnot, and even recommendations in relation to ensuring that nomads, whether they be grey or of a different colour hair, do not use the rest areas, and putting limitations in relation to not having, not unhitching caravans, for example, not having awnings out, not having, not allowing the setting up of, picnic tables and chairs and those types of things. So the guidelines are pretty good, and so we developed those with industry and including Rod, and Rod was consulted a lot and did a lot of driving in that regard, driving in terms of the content of the guidelines. Yeah. But the location is up to, and we make recommendations in the guidelines on approximately how far apart they should be on various routes, depending on the type of traffic.
Yeah, because there's a lot of criticism comes from our trucking fraternity, of course, not so much on the west coast, but certainly over here is, that who the hell thought that was a good idea, and no one's spoken to us. So in terms of location, you can't tell us, there's no working body that says we need to, it's just the state bureaucracy that decides where it goes? They
would do so on the basis of need, so they would generally look at where trucks are stopping. So we through TCA are starting to collect data in relation to where trucks are stopping, and we've literally in the last month or so been collecting that data and been providing it on a draft basis to the Commonwealth, so we might be able to illuminate areas where trucks are stopping to
Well, I suppose I'll throw this one at you then. You don't have to answer them, we'll take away where trucks are stopping, that's fine. But we heard Mr. Hannafy example. I drove it a couple of weeks ago, was it called Pheasant Wood or something? Nest. Pheasant Nest to Wyong. Classic example, because I was sitting there thinking the same thing when I was driving up there. So that wouldn't be a good example you'd take it where the trucks are stopping, because the trucks aren't stopping there. They were stopping somewhere before that. Yeah. But someone thought it was a great idea just to run it straight through.
Yeah. Yes.
So, all right.
Yeah.
All right, now one thing I want to, before I go, Senator McDonald, do you have any questions?
No, thank you, Senator.
Thanks, Senator McDonald. Now, in terms of rest areas and all this, and you may be able to point me, if I said to this nation, this is absolutely ridiculous, because we can have our truck drivers sleeping and working in minute spaces, 36-inch bunk, as we heard earlier on. We can't get extra length in our prime movers because there's less cheap freight we can cut. Is that something that TIC would drive? Could TIC drive that?
Can I suggest that's probably a question better to put to the Commonwealth Department, because as
Sure.
I say, even though we
you
are
can do that.
we are not members of that body, we get invited to do certain things, but we're not members.
No, and thank you for your help.
That's all right.
Really appreciate it, Mr. Allen. So I'm going to put sleeper cabs there. On that case, then, I'm going to thank you for coming down from Sydney to do that for us. How do I get on TIC? Just joking.
Become a minister, I
Joking,
suspect.
yeah, that's right.
But you could...
Mate, I'd make more sense than the whole lot of them. We're talking trucking, but anyway, that's another story. Can I thank you very much, Mr. Allen? Don't take the bait, that's great.
Thank you, sir.
We'll let you go. Thank
Thanks,
you. We'll see you at the
Senator.
next inquiry. Thank you very much. What we will do now is suspend till